The Silence of the Lambs is a novel that I read for the very first time this past week because I had actually watched the movie adaptation for the very first time about 2 weeks ago, and I really love that movie. I've been trying to get into some more vintage horror movies, and so that was one that I wanted to pick up. It's a psychological thriller, of course, but it also is often classified in the horror genre because of its main character, one of its main characters rather, Hannibal Lecter, who is kind of an icon in the serial killer slash horror genre. Now, of course, Hannibal Lecter is not the real main character. He's there, he's present, of course, but our main character is actually a young woman by the name of Clarice. So, The Silence of the Lambs was published originally in 1988, and just a couple years later, the film adaptation was made, which is why many people know the story. Now, I was a little bit concerned when I picked up the novel because, as we know, book to movie adaptations are not always true to the original text. They're not always accurate. And sometimes you'll have a movie that is absolutely nothing like the book, or a movie will be made based on a very small episode from a book. So I wasn't really sure what I was getting into when I picked up The Silence of the Lambs earlier this week, and I just got this little cheap paperback here off of Amazon to read because I do love this size of paperback. But I was pleasantly surprised because the movie adaptation, which I loved, was remarkably true to the book. In fact, almost everything was the same as the content of the book. Very little was missing from the movie, only small details, little tweaks here and there. But the movie was true to the book, and so I enjoyed the book quite a lot. And I think it speaks to the quality of the writing in this book, the quality of the suspense, that I was engaged. I was reading pretty quickly. Even though I knew how the story ended, even though I already knew, based on seeing the movie, exactly how everything was going to unfold, I still found the book really good, which isn't true of other books that I read based on movies. There's some cases where I think the movies are better than the book, but this is a case where I enjoyed the book and the movie equally well. So as I said, although Hannibal Lecter is the character that everybody thinks of when they think of The Silence of the Lambs, our main character is Clarice Starling. Now, she is a young woman in her 20s. She is an FBI trainee, but she's got into the good graces of a man by the name of Jack Crawford, who pulls her out of class, out of training, to go and interview Hannibal in his maximum security prison where he is locked up behind bars with a mouthpiece and so on. And she doesn't know exactly what she's going in there for. She's told it's just a routine interview to try to get him to answer a questionnaire. But of course, Jack Crawford has a different motive in mind. He's hoping that Hannibal will become interested in Clarice, and she does indeed spark his interest, and he wants to know more about her. He is a former psychologist. He actually used to practice, and he's very good at profiling, and he's interested in psychologically interesting people, so to speak. And so Clarice does spark his interest, which prompts him to want to trade information about this ongoing serial killer case that Jack and the rest of the FBI are desperately trying to solve. They're trying to catch this serial killer who they've dubbed Buffalo Bill, who is going around and kidnapping and murdering and then skinning women. And so Clarice gets pulled into this case and pulled into the sphere of Hannibal Lecter, who has agreed to help her by giving her clues in order to solve this case. There is an extra level of high stakes because the daughter of a senator has been snatched as Buffalo Bill's next victim. And so they figure they have approximately 48 hours or so to find her before she is killed. I think one of the reasons that I love this novel so much, and the movie as well, is because of our protagonist, our main character, Clarice. In a lot of police procedurals, you often get men in that role as like the lead detective, or the one who's getting all the leads, the main character essentially. I'm rambling a bit here. But we have Clarice instead, and the way that the author, I don't think I've even mentioned the author yet, the author Thomas Harris, the way that Thomas Harris writes her character is really well done, because the novel keeps that grit that you expect from police procedurals, from thrillers, from horror novels. Sometimes when a woman gets put in that role as the main character, as our detective, it ends up being almost soft, or it ends up with, comedic bits, or what exactly did I call it? Where did it go? It ends up being cute, and I'm not really big on police procedurals, on thrillers that end up cute. So I'm very glad that the author kept that grit in there. But I mean, Clarice is a driven and confident young woman. She's also described as very beautiful, so what's not to love about her? She's intelligent as well. She's able to handle this deranged serial killer, Hannibal. She handles him quite well. You can tell that people are concerned about her welfare because, she's a woman, and so she's vulnerable. But we, as the reader, see that she's not vulnerable at all, really. Another thing I loved about the novel, something compared to the movie, is that in the novel we get a lot more of her backstory, of what it was like for her growing up. One of the things that the movie changes a little bit is the story surrounding her running away from the farm where she went to live, where she heard the lambs screaming. So we get extra details about that in the novel, which I really liked. I think my only criticism here, the only thing that I didn't like about the book, it's actually something I wanted more of from the book that the author didn't deliver on. I wanted to know more about Buffalo Bill. We get a very surface level explanation of his motivations, but we don't have it explained in greater depth. We don't have his motivations explained in greater depth, which I think that I would have liked. That's just kind of a small point. That stuck out to me. I was hoping in the book, compared to the movie, we would get more details, but we don't really get any more about Buffalo Bill's motivations than we do in the movie. So that's something that surprised me, something that disappointed me a bit. But overall, I greatly love this book. It's something I'll read again. This is an author I'm going to be seeking out more from.